Today on Parts Hold, we are going to talk about a riveting subject. It is how do we manage the chemicals and the inventory in the parts room. We're also going to talk a little bit about our big event that we just had out in Los Angeles. And then I'm sure that at some point in time, Cliff is going to give us a beauty tip. All that and more coming up today on Parts Hold.
Here to fill the order.
So man, what a couple of weeks of craziness. You're back out in the field, but not before we did our big annual Top Dog event. So what do you think is the number one takeaway you're hearing from the clients?
A lot of the clients are saying to me, while they're giving me kind of their kind of debriefing, I guess I would call it, and going over what their takeaways and maybe, their genuine feedback of what they did or didn't like. Everyone's kind of saying the same thing, though. It's exactly what they needed at this time.
Do you find that? I mean, you've been around for several of these Top Dog events now. Do you see that they're getting harder and harder to explain exactly what happened?
Yeah, I don't even know what I could liken it to. Whether you call it a magic trick or, however you want to word it. And I don't want to try to paint a picture that, makes it more than what it is or anything of that nature. But you do come away different. Like,
yeah,
I think that's the thing that people don't
experience, right?
I think they don't understand what it means. Yeah. There you go, an experience. But I don't think that people understand what that means. Like when you say you're going to walk away differently than when you came in here, I don't think we can emphasize that enough. That you genuinely. I'll tell you, like a client said, that if we would have told this person everything that was going to be there and they would have heard it, they said, I don't know if I would have come. They said, however, listening to everything and being a part of everything, it was exactly what they needed. And he's not the only one. There's been multiple that have been the same way, that they're all saying the same thing. It's exactly what they need at that time. And if you think about some of the past ones that we've done, each one has had their time and place in the industry, and at that moment that's really hit home with something powerful.
Yeah, and that's definitely our goal. That's not accidental; it's curated. But it was a lot of fun. That we had a few parts managers in the room, which is really cool. And I hope to see more next year. But I think the parts thing is definitely starting to catch a little bit of fire. And just so you all know, you're heard and seen, which has a little bit to do with today's episode. Is we get into our topic. This was all inspired by a comment on a Facebook post, and I'm going to kind of turn it over to Cliff to give more details. But it's a really good. This is kind of going to be maybe like a little bit of a brainstorming session, right, Cliff? And we're going to see if we can't give people a couple of really good ideas to leave with. But go ahead and kind of. I've set it up, so take it away.
Yeah. So the comment was made that a particular parts manager was having an issue managing his Freon in particular, of it going out into the shop and kind of getting lost, and the inventory not matching up to what the computer's showing and what's getting billed out. And his biggest gripe was not that service wasn't doing the right thing. He said service is paying for the differences, but his thing is it's not fair all the way around. And so he was kind of looking for a better process there. And then another comment that I got is actually not from a parts manager, oddly enough. It was from a service personnel that was concerned because they're not getting parts on their mobile vehicles. There's some manufacturers that are really pushing the mobile service, and this particular person asked about putting extra stuff on the vans, and parts told him no.
What do you think the thought is behind that? Why a parts person or parts manager would obviously have the say so in that. Why would a parts manager say no to putting extra stuff on the mobile truck?
You know, I don't want to. So one of the things that we could take away from our top dog is um, a little acronym API, assume positive intent. And so in this, I don't want to assume that parts managers, are withholding and holding back because they want control. Um, there's good intention behind it. Most parts managers don't have control when that item's away from them. And so if you think of it in that sense, that part leaves the facility, leaves the dealership, leaves the parts department, and they no longer have control over it. And most parts managers understand that it's their responsibility to keep track of that inventory, and so they want to keep it really, really close. It's kind of like having that whole thing of where you have an open parts department where people can come and go as they please. You
Which
don't
is
want that.
frightening. Yeah, I agree with that.
And so I think, from a parts manager standpoint, me letting parts go out the door that are not built on a ticket that I can't tangibly, add onto a ticket and see is a frightening thing, because now I'm showing it in inventory. I can't put my hands on it, and who knows what happens to it from there.
Yeah, I just think that there's just a got to be a weekly or twice weekly reconciliation with the mobile truck. I feel like
So
this
I would
is
like to
not
get
as big a concern as someone might think at first, right? If I stole your thunder, please, by all means, correct me. But
no. I wanted to say there's three things that I would like to share within this, next few minutes. But number one is getting a system in place that you can reconcile the inventory on a normal basis.
yeah,
You
so
know,
when it comes to like whether it's mobile, you could probably have the same philosophy when it comes to. I've got a lot of clients where the express department has their own cabinet.
yes,
So all that stuff has to have a system. I would treat the mobile truck and the cabinet the same exact way.
exactly the same way. You know, you've been in the business long enough, and I've certainly been in it long enough that we remember
Four
when we were
months, 4 months, Cliff.
well, I've been 6 months, just a smidge longer. Um, but we were giving quarts of oil over the parts counter, and then we
Yeah,
went to
in the court bottles.
then we went to a bulk system, and that was revolutionary. That changed everything. And I remember when we first got it at the store that I was at, we dialed it up. So every time the technician needed some, he still had to come to the parts counter and say he needed 5 quarts of oil, and then he went over to his handy dandy nozzle and he
Yeah,
put it in the cart
you
and he
hit the
filled it up.
5 enter, and then the stall that you sent it enter, and then it released it. Right.
Yeah,
It's actually
but
just that's actually how a gas pump works.
yeah, and I think you can have an open one that allows allows the technician the freedom to be able to dial that up at a second, and you can monitor it. But one of the things that I found is a system that you had to have in place where you were constantly reconciling that on not only a weekly basis, but in a lot of cases, depending the size of your shop, it might be a daily basis.
Yeah. I think that the thing is when you got the free flowing oil, that it's a heck of a lot to police. Whereas it just makes sense, right? When an RO is generated, let's say that you got the pump system, is that, the counter person just essentially bills out filter, bills out the gasket, and then hits the pump up for 5 quarts of 0W20 or whatever it is, right?
Right.
Like that makes sense to me. I know that there's a lot of human interaction there, but I would guess you have a much cleaner inventory because I think no matter what, when you're not managing it, oil will walk, right? Like it won't get billed out in RO, or we throw a couple of quarts into a car or whatever it is, but like the inventory doesn't match if you don't do that. And I really believe that accuracy is next to godliness when it comes to inventory management. But more often than not, I think the biggest sin is whether it's refrigerant, like which is what you brought up in your first instance, or oil is another really, really good thing. Is that just kind of any of your GOG is that if you're not tracking it on a per RO basis in the shop, then you're probably missing out. And all around, it's good hygiene.
there has to be good communication all the way around, from parts department to the service advisor to the technician to the service manager and parts manager. Like in the system that you lay out for your store, there has to be really good open communication and open dialogue, because if this is the first time you're doing it, and in the case of the Freon deal, one of his things was as far as the storage of it. I do think that stuff needs to come back to the parts department. If it's on a rolling cart, such as a Freon thing, bring it back to the parts department and store it, or at least in a tool room where it can't magically disappear. Some of that new Freon is really, really expensive,
Oh
but
yeah, the 1, 2, 3, 4 Y is super expensive.
it's outrageously expensive. So even to the hose reels with the oil in them, being able to shut them off at night so that they can't get you know used by somebody after hours, or however that looks. But there has to be some security along with that too. The cabinets, we had cabinets at both stores that I worked at, and those were on lockdown. Now I had great communication with the parts manager, um, and we did do a reconciliation. Probably because I was parts and service director was probably one of the reasons I had good communication. But
That might have
uh,
helped.
yeah, that might help just a little bit. But it allowed, we did a weekly reconciliation. It was counted every week, and we managed it that way. Our oil was counted every other day, because early on in my career, when I didn't manage it properly, we ran out of oil. Worst case scenario, technician coming and already drained it out, and they're telling me we're out of oil. So terrible situation. So having a system in place that you're managing it and reconciling it, it's okay to put it on a parts truck. It's the same thing as, like you said at the beginning of this, it's the same thing as having it on an express truck. It's the exact same thing, but having a good list of stuff that's on there, and being able to reconcile is key.
So let's flip that. We're talking about inventory management a little bit, but while we're talking about it, did you have a pricing strategy or philosophy on how you bill GOG?
I did a lot of family pricing along with that stuff, if that's what you're asking me. Yes.
Yeah. Could you unpack that a little bit? Yeah. So explain that a little.
Yep. So family pricing, I want to price weight average everything based on the sales. If I'm selling a lower value dollar item, more often it holds a higher weight than something that is a little bit more pricey that I sell far less. And so you want to price weight average it based on whatever pricing structure you set at, on the markup or margin that you want. And so it allows you to effectively be able to bill out the same part, or the same item at the same price every time. A lot of DMSs allow you to build a kit in there, so you can add all your part numbers in there and just use one part number, and it relieves your inventory of that item. So there's tons of different ways to do that based on the DMS and based on the system that are out there. I know for one, there's one particular DMS that has a really, really good function that you can actually add those part numbers in there, and it'll give you that markup based on the price weight averaging.
Did you have a target margin you were trying to get at with those products at all?
Yeah, I didn't go as high on those as some of my other ones. Those were probably in the lower, high 30s, low 40s. I didn't go quite as heavy on those because I felt that a lot of those items were more my competitive items, and I wanted to keep the costs really, really kind of more in line with what the competition was doing out there, and what they could find it at. Now,
Yeah, that makes sense.
I had a benefit too, that both the manufacturers that I worked for, you couldn't find their parts at other parts houses.
Okay, so
So
you can go to Napa and get the stuff.
yeah, so you could kind of make the price what I wanted to, because I dictated the market on that. You couldn't find those brand parts, so that's changed a little bit over the years, where you can find some of the stuff now for at least one of the manufacturers, but one of them you couldn't. So depending on that, but I still would want to that's one of those things that's becomes competitive, especially on an oil change. Um, I want to kind of be priced right, and I don't want my if I'm a parts manager, I want my counter people to be really, really efficient. So I don't want them having to adjust any pricing in there. So I would set my pricing structure in there so that's one price, one part number, they're billed, and they're done.
Okay, cool. That makes a lot of sense. So Um, I guess my kind of closing question would be more so like kind of on the ancillary stuff. So like when it comes to washer fluid or like the things that you kind of do on every car and if you top off coolant and everything like that, what is your philosophy in terms of that and inventory management, pricing if you're billing on an RO or whatever? What are your thoughts behind that?
Some of that stuff, again, I think that falls under the communication side of it. That I need to have a good open dialogue with my service manager. And for instance, the washer, you mentioned washer fluid. Maybe that's not billed on every ticket, or maybe it's a fee that's billed on every line. However that looks, maybe that becomes a shop fee. But it's got to be dictated based on your business model for your departments. And so I would want to have that good open communication with them, that I can have the feedback and constant feedback, because in the end, I'm going to have to take back some comments from service on what's working and what they need and what they don't need for these cabinets, for washer solvent, for bulk items. Um, did I answer your question on that?
Yeah, I think the thing I was kind of trying to unpack or uncover a little bit is that the that if you're looking at your financial statement and you're seeing a debit in chemicals, that's a problem, right? So the big thing is that if you don't price effectively, what you find out is you're actually losing money on things like washer fluid, where maybe you can be charging a flat fee per RO or per line or whatever it is, but you don't do any of that stuff. You're not monitoring it. People are using way more than you think that they're using. Like one of the things is I washer fluid kind of for whatever reason hits me a certain way because like there's so much to be said about one is how much one of those barrels of concentrate costs. And then people not even understanding like the mixture level. So if you mix it too heavy, you're using a ton of it, and then it's like it's way more powerful. So Cliff was in North Carolina, right? Like you don't have to have it going to -40,
Right.
and so often that is so poorly managed. And then at the end of the day, when you do a reconciliation, if you do, you find that you're way short. And I just believe it should be a profit center. It doesn't have to be a crazy profit center like you mentioned that you kind of change the expectation on your margins. But really, if you're not managing that, it means you're not turning it into profit. And it's way too often that I'll see people running a debit in that, which is not where you want to be.
Yeah, I think one of the you made a great point on giving the financial and reviewing that. And most parts managers are really really great at knowing and understanding their numbers, and so they probably looked at a lot of things like that. But that might be one that they've skipped over. Not looking below and looking at the tire line, the GOG line, and those sorts of things. So I would completely agree that there has to be, you have to figure out what's the business model for the store. Is it getting charged out at one time and then collecting back on a service side under shop fees or whatever, or how does that look for your store? Because I've seen a couple different ways of doing that. Um, but if you're not monitoring it, not watching it, it's going out the door and you're not making money off of it.
Yeah. So I think that the key to the people that do really well with this is it's that they monitor and they look at it as a profit opportunity, right? Those are kind of the two main keys.
Yeah, the thing that I would like to add to that, and would be my last kind of item, is why not be able to put it stuff out there? Try different items, because in the end, it's not about you; it's really about the customer. And so I want to figure out what's the most efficient way that I can take care of the customer and make it about them. And so when I look at it and say, well, I don't want to put a parts cabinet out there because I can't control it. Well, it's not really about you in a sense. It's about the customer, and can I take care of the customer? And so I've got to figure out a process to be able to do that. The other one is, if I don't want to switch to a bulk system or monitor that or take back the stuff, like I've got to just create stuff that's going to be really customer centric and customer focused, because at the when you wash it all out, it's all about the customer, and I want them coming back, and I want to create a great experience for them. So whatever I have to do to figure that out, I need to figure that out.
Yeah, good stuff. Is keeping the customer in mind, like with a lot of things that we say. And then, did you do bulk whenever you could?
Yes. Yeah. Bulk
Yeah,
was just, it was easier for me. probably more so when I became parts and service director because I looked at it from both sides. But even as parts manager, it was really, really simple for us, and we monitored it really, really good. I had some really good counter people that kept track of that for me. That was kind of that was their bin check for the week was those bulk fluids, and then we counted them once a month at the end of the month too. So we really kept a really tight rein on it. Now that's not saying that we didn't have shortages and that stuff didn't walk out the door. We definitely had our share of that, but we did a really good job of monitoring that on a weekly and monthly basis.
Great. Yeah, I think that's the the bigger story is that whatever it is, whatever you got coming out of the parts department, whether it's a chemical or a physical part, you gotta pay attention, right, to the inventory. So
Yeah, and anytime that I can make it easier on everybody, that's what I want to do.
yeah, I agree. And at the end of the day, that person we want to make it easier on is the customer. Now
Yes.
the employees get a benefit from that too. But if they're the number one priority, you always do it right.
Yeah,
And there's making money on that stuff is not a dirty thing.
that's right.
All right. Well, I think that'll do it. So thank you. Keep those questions and comments coming on the Facebook page, or if you want to do a call in, you can call 1-8333 ask SDR and say, hey, I've got a question for Parts Hold. We'd love to hear from you on the phone lines too. We'll send you a little bit of swag, which is always fun to have swag in your closet. But aside from that, I'm Christian Lafferty. Cliff Honeycutt, thank you so much. And so long from Parts Hold.
Here to fill the order.